So yeah, kind of going off what we were just talking about. Why do you do what you do? Like, where does all of this come from, and where does the inspiration come from to put this online?
Right. It's a great question. Um, at the highest level, I've been called from however you'd like to call it, my inner guidance, God, my Kundalini, my higher self. I've been compelled to share. Sometimes there's things that are coming up that need to be expressed. Very early on in my path, I found myself almost automatically being given a name for a blog and things to put on this blog. And it was happening without my effort per se. It was almost in like a channeling state.
Yeah.
Um, Later on, I received like very direct guidance that I'm going to be sharing messages to support other people on their awakening journey. And interestingly enough, myself as Brent put up a little bit of resistance to that,
Mm.
saying, oh, I'm not ready to do that. This is, I'm going to be labeled as a crazy person. And it was this sort of push that I've been given, but I don't always feel ready to do that. But things come through me and the opportunities to share present themselves. Like, for example, you reached out to me and said, hey, let's chat. So it's happening on its own. And oftentimes I don't know where this is going. I don't have an agenda or a plan. I look at it as if I've been employed and the boss is kind of telling me what to do and training me along the way. And I make mistakes, not always perfect at it. Sometimes I want to, not do this because of the implications that come along with it. Like I mentioned, a lot of this is for the average person. You look like a crazy person. And so this is not necessarily something that I'm super like, yeah, let's go and be a spiritual teacher. It's just something I've been compelled to do by something a little bigger than myself. And even though I put up some resistance at times, it still doesn't let up. So here I am, just doing my best to bring forth what comes through.
Yeah. So you're almost like a channel, like a servant to a greater force.
Yeah, I could call it channeling for sure. Sometimes we think of channeling as like people connecting, with like interdimensional beings and bringing their message forth, or they specifically say that they're going to enter into a channeling state and bring something forth. And I could call what I'm doing that in some respect, but sometimes the lines are a little blurred. I don't know what's channeled and what's mine, and it's so I don't necessarily call it channeling, but that is definitely in line with the way that I operate and the way that these things come through.
Mm. Where's it coming from?
Right. So I would say that it's coming from something beyond me that is still the container of me. Okay.
Mm.
So it's a larger aspect of me that animates everything around us, all over. But my limited mind, and when I say me, I'm referring to my mind, this identity of Brent is very limited, doesn't have this expanded understanding of things. Like, for example, I put out that diagram explaining the different samadhis. That quite literally came to me 10, 15 minutes before I started to put that together in the shower. And I thought,
Of
okay, I
course,
want
in the
to,
shower.
right. So I thought, as soon as I'm done the shower, I'm going to feel fresh. I'm going to sit down on my computer. I'm going to speak about the different levels of samadhi, just to address, offer a breakdown for people that are, navigating the path of meditation. Okay, so how am I going to describe this? And then I imagined this line, and on the line were the different levels of samadhi, and then there was the higher level, sahaja samadhi. I thought, okay, that's not going to fit on the line because it doesn't really fall on the line. And then I received like almost like a gnosis, you could say, a download of a circle encompassing the entire line. And then I began to draw this line on my shower, on the glass in the shower.
Oh.
Right. And so like, that's sort of how things happen at times. Sometimes it's not, given to me by gnosis per se. It's more like an accumulation of things that I've experienced in research and books that I've read and conversations that I've had. And it's kind of an accumulation of those things. And when I sit down to put something together to put out for people, I relax, and whatever needs to come, it sort of just comes out. Oftentimes it comes out in the form of jot notes. and then I expand upon those jot notes, and I put it out, and some people say that it's beneficial. Some people sometimes will critique it. That's fine. Like I said, I don't really take much of it personally because I'm just an employee. The boss is really bringing it. I don't always feel like it's even my work. I look back at the things that I put out and I listen to it, I read it, and I'm a student of it as well. So that's kind of how I work with this. That's where I think it's coming from. I think it's coming from something greater than me. It's trying to teach me, and then whoever else benefits from it as well. That's fantastic too.
Mm. Yeah, I actually approach this whole thing that I'm doing online the same way. It's a learning process for me, and then anybody else that wants to come along on the ride can come along. So it's interesting. I mean, I think there's a story in yoga, or not a story, but a saying, it's that you're always the student, and I feel that 100%. The journey of enlightenment, one could say, the journey of self inquiry, of self illumination, whatever you want to call it, it never ends. The journey is the destination. The more you learn, the more the more you know that you don't know about yourself. And that's how I approach pretty much my whole life. I wake up and I say, all right, what can I learn today? And yeah, it's a beautiful process to be able to do that. I think that's a it's a different way to approach life, for sure. To approach it with a sense of like conscious ignorance in a way. Like, that you don't know a lot of things, but yet remain curious, and then from that vantage point serve and work from that. It's cool to be able to do that, because it's a weird, almost like childlike essence to that. Almost like a sense of playfulness, almost like a sense of renewal in your being when you can approach every day like that, every moment like that. For me, that allows me to just feel less inertia in this life that we think is so dark, so bleak, and it's against me. But if you can approach it with a sense of willful playfulness in your own ignorance, like be okay with that, then I think you can start to enjoy and go with the flow of this life, and then create along with that greater creator that we spoke about.
Right on.
Yeah, man.
Can't argue with that at all. Yeah. Like they say in Zen, right? You have that beginner's mind. And being in that state, you have to give up a sense of arrogance, sense of knowing everything, any sort of sense of being overconfident. You have to give all of that up and be humble and be willing to be open and curious. And so that's the exchange that needs to be made. But when you make that trade, it's incredible, right? Like you said, every day you wake up, you learn something new, and you're constantly expanding in that way.
Yeah.
Constantly growing.
Yeah, man. So where did this start off for you? Like, was there a moment where the light bulb went on and, you kind of got on the path per se? Was there an experience that happened, like some kind of event, or was this, you think, a gradual thing from past lifetimes, or both?
Yeah, I would say both. With that said, I'm not too much of a past life guy. I don't focus on that sort of stuff, right? There's enough going on in this life for me to, be occupied with.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that this is my first time exploring these things. And I've got some experiences that kind of hint at that for me. A lot of the things that come across very familiar to me. But in this lifetime, I would say that it's been a gradual unfolding for sure, across my whole lifetime. And I was thinking about it because, I was looking forward to our conversation, and you mentioned that, we might speak about my journey and my path a little bit. And this is the first time I've really sat down with anybody to talk about it in this way. And what started to come to me was, I'll just come out and say it. I was born awake, right? And I know that, at this point, maybe some people will roll their eyes. I think we all were. I think we all were as children. I think they all are in that state of awareness that is a little spaciousness away from their ego, or even if they have an ego to begin with. I don't even think they do at this point. So when I say I was born awake, right. It's like a very, very innocent fluid state that isn't rigid. There isn't this like rigid, like, like solid sense of self inside their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is how I remember being as a child. Some of my earliest memories, I would go to bed, going to sleep, I would have this experience of my body sort of expanding and sort of melting. And I would enter into sort of like this, what I would perceive at the time as like outer space. And in this outer space feeling, I was able to be very, very precise with observing and controlling the thoughts that would arise in my mind. And I would play games. I would have a game that would be like, okay, my last thought was about elephants. How did I get to elephants? Okay, I thought about the zoo, about school, and I thought about a field trip that we were going to go to the zoo. Well, how did I start thinking about school? Well, I was thinking about my friend and the game that we played. And I would just play these games like this, like just watching the different ways that the mind's thoughts and where they would go from subject to subject. And I could stop the mind at will and let it run, and just let it run in a way that it was like playful, curious. Let's see what thoughts will arise. And there was a lot of spaciousness. At this point, I didn't identify myself with the mind. This voice in my head wasn't me. I was just the one who's playing with it, And of course, at the time, none of this could be articulated. I just thought this was, this was life. This is what it was about. And of course, we know that the mind is a tool, right? It's useful. But as a child, when you give a child a tool, what do? They play with it. So that's what I was doing. I was playing with these thought streams. I was playing with the mind. I had that freedom, that spaciousness to do that sort of thing. And, I must have been 5, 6 years old. This was, my experience. And I remember some of the earliest moments where I began to fall asleep, where I began to identify with the mind, with the ego. The sense of self began to form. And all of this has come to me only within the past, year, few months, actually, really contemplating deep, some of the formative experiences of my ego, you could say. And so I remember being about 6 years old, 7 years old, and my parents at this point, they would pick up my clothes to wear, I'd wear them, I'd go to school, whatever. But then there was one day my parents took me to the store. My mom said, pick out a pair of pants. And suddenly I was given autonomy, a sense of independence to make a choice. Who was Brent going to be? Was I going to be the kid who wears like the pants with the dinosaurs on it? Or was I going to be the kid wearing the cool jeans?
Yeah.
And I remember picking out, I remember making this conscious choice. I'm going to be a cool kid. And cool kids wear cool pants. And so I bought these like black jeans. They were baggy. They had these pockets. It was cool. And from that point forward, Brent was now one of the cool kids. And at that age, when you go to school, you're either a cool kid or you're not a cool kid. So that was the basic dichotomy. Basically, the ego was very, very minimal, very rudimentary. You're cool or you're not. And so I was cool. Now, what does a cool person do? A cool kid hangs out with other cool kids. Brent's a guy with cool friends. He does cool things. He says cool things. This is how my ego started to formulate around being cool. And of course, it was still gradual at this time. I was still innocent as a child, but there was this identity forming. And the identity was forming based around emotional charge. So the idea of being cool has an emotional charge around it, because if you're not cool, you're rejected. And there's a great fear around that. So now there's a lot invested in being cool, being Brent, the cool kid. And of course, this sort of continued. And now there was a little less spaciousness between my mind, which was before a playful tool. Now it's an identity. It's who I am. And the spaciousness around it began to close. The gap began to close. I began to identify with it. I must have been about 10 years old. And there was another key moment where I used to skateboard a lot. And I would go to school in the morning. Now I would take the bus, so I couldn't bring my skateboard, but there was this one kid who would skateboard to school. And I remember I asked him, let me use your skateboard. I'll show you some tricks. And he refused to let me use it. And I went home and I remember beginning this mental movie, this rumination, this fantasy, if you will, about how the next day I was going to convince him to let me use a skateboard. and I would do some tricks and a crowd would form and I would be super cool. Right. And he was an older kid. So, I was like, and I remember this fantasy, it was motivated not by excitement. It was motivated by like a need to once again be super cool, this identity. And I was, thinking about if he argues with me, I'll say this and I'll say that, and all this kind of stuff was going on. And I remember when this was happening, it was the first time I had this sort of rumination, this sort of anxiety, this real strong projection into the future. And I remember thinking like, man, this is really uncomfortable. What I'm experiencing right now, I wanted to stop, but I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop it. It was all happening automatically. Then, of course, I went to school the next day. I saw the kid with a skateboard, and none of my plan, happened at all. I didn't even say a word to him, right? And then from that point forward, this ego was now like becoming more and more rigid, and more ruminations of the future began to happen. More and more things about the past, about what happened, and how I wish I could repeat that, or why did that happen to me, and I'm a victim of that, or I became stuck in time now. Right now, Brent was this rigid identity, which was emotionally charged. So now there's like a solidified sense of self-ego around it. Brent's the guy who skateboards, who's cool, who doesn't like his brother, who has these friends, and all these things start to sort of formulate around the ego. And now that's who I am, solidified. And that's when I would say I fell asleep. Right now I'm asleep, living in this mind and the ego. I totally identified with it and suffering as a result. Right, like when I speak about that rumination about the whole skateboard thing, that was, I think, one of the first times that I began to really suffer as a result of something going on in my head alone. Nothing outside of me was triggering. That was all in my head. And that's when like real suffering happened. And I remember noting that, like I said, saying, this is really uncomfortable, but I cannot stop it. And that is, I think, some of the earliest experiences that I had with suffering as a result of being identified with the mind, being identified with the ego. And I mean, I can pause there. Of course, it keeps going, but let me know if you have anything, if you'd like me to expand upon, or if you have any inputs yourself. Maybe you've got some similar memories.
Oh, I get it, man. I don't have any specific memories like that. I actually have a pretty jaded memory of my childhood, but I mean, it's pretty relatable from what you were talking about, and I think a lot of other people can relate to that. I mean, that's the trajectory of human beings in the 21st century at this point. It's we start off as this pure being, and then we get molded into a narrative of who we think we are from other people, from our tribe-like mindset, just from our parents, from our DNA, whatever it is, we get molded into this being of the ego, like you said. That's the first step, I think, on the path, is realizing that it's like, oh shit, like where are all these thoughts coming from? Why do I have to try to be cool? Like, who put that in my head? So I think the first step, really, waking up, quote unquote, is waking up to the illusion of yourself. But then you can wake up to the actual capital S self that's within you, like our true identity. But first, you have to recognize the falsity that we're living under, and that, yeah, man. How do you like? Where do you think that comes from in people? How do we get this wake up call per se? Does it come from a sense of inertia in our life where it just, like, you can't bear living under that illusion anymore, and then there's something in us, an inkling in us that says, come back home. There's got to be another way. Do you think it comes from struggle, comes from suffering, from Prakriti?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I haven't come across anybody in my life who's hasn't suffered before finding the path, before coming to explore spiritual practices. Sure, there might be some people out there, but that seems to be what provides the context to give us something to awaken out of, right? And that was what happened to me. So after, like I said, this ego was formed and rigid, and from then on, I had many more experiences of suffering. And eventually in high school, I was, not having a lot of success in dating. There was a feeling of, what is my adulthood going to look like? Don't know what direction my life is going in.
Yeah,
you know,
inadequacy.
inadequacy, of course. All of these things start to kind of pile onto me, and it became really, really dark, really dark. And that's what caused me to seek a way out. Um, and I mean, if I really think about it, it's not even that I was seeking a way out sort of came to me. It fell in my lap. And I can speak about that in a second, but I'll paint a little bit of a picture. There was a period in high school where, you know, like I said, I wasn't having a lot of success in dating. I was feeling inadequate, feeling rejected, lonely. And something dawned on me. And I realized, you know, even if I were to get what I wanted, it's fleeting. The next day I'll want something else.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the first time I'd had this realization. It seems so, you know, obvious to maybe you or I to say this now, but a lot of people might not have realized this. And I thought, you know, it's almost like I'm running on a hamster wheel, like somebody's dangling a carrot in front of me. And I thought, okay, so how about other people? What about my parents? Well, they're waiting to pay off the mortgage. Okay. When they pay off the mortgage, will they be happy? Well, then they might want to retire. And then when they retire, they might want grandkids. I'm like, okay, so they're on this hamster wheel. You know, if you're like a movie star, I look at movie stars, okay, they're rich and famous. Then why are they, not all of them, but why are some of them, you know, getting involved in addiction, scandals? These people aren't happy either. We're all on this hamster wheel. And this was absolutely horrifying to me. It was terrifying because I thought, you know what? I can finish school. And then when I go to university and then get a job, I'm never going to be satisfied. I felt like Sisyphus pushing that boulder up the hill, and then it would roll back down and he's got to push it back up. And this was absolutely horrifying. And this went on for a few months where I just felt very cynical, very hopeless. Like everything was pointless. And in this very dark, dark place, somebody had randomly sent me a message on Facebook. This was back when you could add random people on Facebook and it wasn't like this creepy thing. So there was one guy, he just said, add me, whatever. And one day he just sends me a message that says, hey, read this book. And I didn't post anything about, you know, being depressed. I didn't do anything like that, but he just says, hey, read this book. And it's Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So, and back then I didn't read, by the way, but for some reason I was compelled to read this book. And like I said, it fell in my lap. And it was once again one of those experiences where something was pushing me. So I pick up this book and reading the PDF online. So I think he had just sent me the PDF and I'm reading it. And it's just explaining everything to me. And it's opening up this well of peace within my system. And for your listeners who aren't maybe familiar with The Power of Now and Eckhart Tolle's work, generally speaking, he speaks of recognizing that there is a spaciousness, a presence, awareness that you can abide as to take space from identifying with the ego mind. And when you abide as that spaciousness, as that presence, you begin to find peace. And this can be practiced. And so I'm 15 years old. I'm reading this book. I went over to my cousin's house that night and on her bookshelf, she's got the book. And I thought, oh my God. And so I grabbed it and I read it like, you know, very, very quickly. And it explained everything to me. It explained, you know, I was no longer seeing the world as, you know, just being Sisyphus pushing this rock up the hill. I thought, okay, if I'm in the moment, I can access peace. And I don't have to seek fulfillment in the future. I don't have to dwell on the past. I can access peace in the moment and I can live my life in this place. I can still go to work, go to school, have relationships, but without this false sense of feeling as if the future was going to satisfy me. And this made perfect sense. And I had what you would maybe call a Satori experience or an awakening experience where I recognized, just like as a child, that I can witness the mind. I can observe the mind. I can abide as presence, as awareness. And I remember this was so new and exciting to me. It was like I had access, it was like I was living in like a bungalow and suddenly I discovered that there was a second floor to my house. And I remember trying to tell people that, hey, you know, you can watch your thoughts, you can watch your mind. And they're just like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And I thought, okay, maybe this is something that isn't as easy to express or to get for everybody. And so that's when I kind of just began practicing very, very fervently. Like it consumed everything in my life, was being present, be mindful. At this point, I couldn't sit still in meditation, but I knew that when I was, you know, I worked part-time, I would do school, whatever it was, I could be present. And it was this practice. And I'd given myself fully to it. I recognized this was the only answer. There's nothing else. There's no other game to play. This is it. And I was able to, climb out of this depression. I had found new skills and new interests as well. Started reading a lot of Buddhism, a lot of things from the East, yoga, Advaita Vedanta, listening to podcasts, kind of like what you've got going on over here, stuff on YouTube, listening to different teachers. And what I realized was, when I mentioned earlier on, when I thought, I don't know anybody who's made it. Celebrities haven't made it. My parents haven't made it. Nobody's made it. That's when I found, there are people who have quote unquote made it, and they're spiritual masters, okay. So I can turn to them and I can see what they're modeling for me, see what they're teaching. So that's kind of the direction that my life went at this point.
Interesting. It was so young. You said 15?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. Very mature. Mine was like, I don't know. I probably started to get on this wavelength around mid-20s. At 15, I was just worrying about video games and I don't even know. Just wanted to, play sports, maybe lift weights. I'm not on this at all. So that's very interesting that you got on that wavelength that so young. But that's good. It's a great thing.
I think that what contributes to that is that I still am rather sensitive. And so the things that maybe you were much more resilient to tolerate, I couldn't. Like I was just like,
I see.
I couldn't trudge on. And so when I look at other people and like, for example, you're telling me that, you had a great teenage experience, or like you didn't come to the point where you had to seek spirituality. I'm impressed. For whatever reason. I was just maybe not the right word, but I was a wimp. I just couldn't handle it. Right. I couldn't suck it up. I had to find a way out. And that's sort of what drew me to seek so strongly. Of course, we could also speak about, maybe I put in work in past lifetimes and stuff like that. Maybe that's also what kind of laid the context for this to happen earlier on in my life. But when I look at this life, regardless of past life stuff, I was just super sensitive. And I can't imagine my life without this. I don't know I don't think I'd be here, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel that, man. Because it's like, you first say, there's got to be another way. And then once you find the other way of making it, like you said, per se, then you realize there's no other way. That's what's very peculiar about this path, is that it's like once you get the taste of this so-called freedom, this so-called liberation, it never leaves your being. And it's like, it's not a curse per se in that way. It's actually a blessing in that way. It's actually grace to know that the drama, the happenings of our life, the things that were causing us so much woe, they don't mean anything. They don't mean anything, because the truth of the matter is that bliss, that peace, that stillness that we want, that we think we're going to get from materialism, that our society tells us we'll get from when we get the car, when we get the house, we got the 3 kids and the picket fence and the 2 dogs, my beautiful wife. It's not like that. It's not like, you get to this point, or when I become this person, this is when I'll be happy. No, it's right here, right now. That's what you come to find. It's right here, right now. Right here, right now. There's no other way to really put it. It's right here, right now. But the problem is our mind plays tricks on us, and it takes us out of the moment, from our conditionings, from our DNA, whatever it is, just being a human, being a faulty human. It takes us out of our true essence, which is weirdly ironic. It takes us out of that presence that we always are residing as, that state of peace, by trying to be somebody, by trying to be somewhere, by trying to get something. But the truth of the matter is, and once you get that taste, is that we're always at peace. We always will be. We always were at this sense of peace. So it's like the path of spirituality. It's like this weird game that you have to play with yourself to be able to reside at that peace, to find that peace within at all points in time, no matter where you are. It's like not finding the peace. No, let me back up. It's like, it's like being able to find the peace outside of meditation. When you're out in the world, the true middle way is being able to be at that nirvana-like state no matter where you are. You don't have to be a saint. You don't have to be a monk. Use them as teachers. Use them as examples, and people like that have made it. Like you said, I like made it. I like the. I'm going to use that. These people made it per se. Use those people as examples for your own circumstances and your own karma in your life, and how your life unfolds through your own samskaras. And then, if you can get on that wavelength, get that taste that it's possible, I don't think there's no other way to live. I don't foresee, speaking from myself, I can't go back into the matrix per se. You know, there's no other goal per se of life, even though there's no goal. Like I said, it's already here and now. But in the humanly form that I'm speaking from right now, and the example that we're speaking of in the unfoldment of Gary Haskins, there is a goal to reside as the saint-like being, in a way, of finding peace in my own life. And I can't go any. There's no other way, man. There's no other way, and I'm completely thankful that I have found that. And I don't even think I found that, like you said, man. I think it just happened from grace. It's a blessing from God, Source, the Infinite. Maybe, I don't know why, who, like you said, from past lives, the effort in past lives, whatever it is, I'm eternally grateful that it happened to me. But I don't know. I don't know what else to say, man. I'm thankful that my third eye has been opened to be able to perceive life in this way. And for anybody else listening, if there is anybody else listening right now, and you know what I'm talking about, I think it's important. I'm not telling anybody what to do, but it's important to express a little bit of gratitude for being able to be on this wavelength, because it really is truly a blessing to have this point of view. And we're not crazy. I'm not crazy. I don't think you're not crazy, Brent. We're actually more on the sane side of this life. We're kind of reaching a point of sanity in an insane world. I think Krishnamurti has a saying, it's no measure of peace to be well adjusted to a insanely sick society. So that's kind of summing up what I just said. It's a summation. Is that even a word? Summation. I don't even know of what I just said. It's finding our own peace, residing as a human being, not what anybody else tells you, not even like how the monks or the saints have done it. Use them as an example to find that in your own life. Get on the path, the journey to that, and every day is a journey, and every day becomes magical. And for that, I'm eternally grateful to whoever or whatever has bestowed that upon me. End of my rant.
Amen. Yeah, there's a lot of gratitude here as well to have found, this path, to have been, invited on it.
Yeah.
And within Buddhism, they say, if you have a human life, a human reincarnation, you must really, be grateful and make the most of it, because it's a rare thing.
Yeah.
And it's rare even still to be a human being, to find the path. And so, of course, there's immense gratitude here as well. Sometimes there's also feelings of unworthiness that may arise too. Why me and not other people?
Mm-hmm.
Don't have all the answers for that, but that's still something that, I'm working on myself, is addressing the question of, why me? Why not me? Right. But yeah, definitely a lot of gratitude here as well to be on this path. Sure. And I really like the way you were hammering the point, here and now. Really, that is the essence of my process. I remember making like a very clear line in the sand that moving forward, no matter what happens, I return to the now. I make an effort to return to the now, regardless of what happens. I return to the now. And the same power of the now that you were sharing, I felt it as well. There's nothing else. There's no circumstance in life that being in the now wouldn't benefit from. And when I realized that, It became an ongoing practice. Yeah, I became like very, very dedicated. And yeah, even though I was, in my teenage years, everything else became secondary to that. Just being in the now. That's it.
Be here now. It's very simple.
Right.
It's simple. We overcomplicate it, but it's pretty simple. The truth is pretty simple. It's not easy, I guess you could say, to decondition our monkey mind to be able to resonate at that level, but it's right here, right now. It's simple. It's so simple. If there is a goal per se to this path, would you say that is why we go through all of these meditations, psychedelic experiences, things, practices that we put ourselves through? It's to just be able to be at peace with the here and now, no matter what happens on the outside world in the illusion of Maya. Whatever happens in our life, to be completely present. Don't resist the now, right? Don't want to be somewhere else. Don't yearn for the past. To simply be here with all of our darkness, our pain, physical, emotional, to just simply be with it. Would you say that is kind of the essence of the spiritual path?
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Being with it. And when we say being with it, I think that, at least in my view, it means being aware of it, being conscious of it, not resisting it, allowing it to be here, totally allowing it to be here without a sense of this isn't good, this is bad. And we can go one step further. And even those moments where we find ourselves lapsing out of the now, for example, falling off with our sadhana, with our practice, that's okay too, right? Sometimes we tend to maybe beat ourselves up. Oh, I read Eckhart Tolle's book and I just got into an argument and I was stuck in time. I'm a bad person. I'm not doing good on the spiritual path. This is horrible. No, that's okay too, right? I think that there's a lot of leeway to be imperfect, to dance
Mm-hmm.
on this path a little bit, to fall off, and to find the lesson and the joy in finding new ways to get back on. I think that all of it is part of the path, and I don't think that there's anybody that's off the path in this way that I'm speaking of. People have nothing to do with this; they're still on the path and they're walking it perfectly, right?
Yeah, very true. Yeah, it's very true. So, in that sense, do you see a world completely? Um, I mean, this sounds kind of pompous to say, but like, do you see a world that's completely awakened, enlightened? I guess you could say a species, the human species, all 8 billion of us on this wavelength of God, of love, of the here and now, and serving from that, living from that wavelength. No more war, no more competition, kumbaya kind of state. Do you see that in the future happening? Or is there a place for the
Personally,
darkness?
I don't see that happening. Um, there's different levels that we can look at it from, but I like to think of Bhagavad Gita. I like to think of what they speak of in Hinduism, Leela, which is the play, the drama, right? And so in Bhagavad Gita, which is a great Hindu text, speaks about a war in which people die. And God comes down to speak to a warrior, Arjuna, and God says, get on with the play. It's okay, right? Yeah, this is war. People are going to die, and that's okay. It's part of the unfolding of the drama that is providing the context for all of this that's unfolding. And so this is not, I don't want to come across as insensitive. I'm speaking from a very high absolute perspective, which I would never say to somebody who's, had their house blown up by war. But I don't see a future in which we are, no longer having any drama, any contrasting experiences, any context for growth, which involves hardship, challenge. It involves things going wrong. It involves selfishness and pain and suffering. And from the highest perspective, like we were saying before, we're all presence, consciousness, God to begin with. But we're having an experience here pretending that we're not. But in the ultimate picture, it's okay if something bad happens to us. It's okay. Because even if we were to die, we return back into that free, that liberation, connection and oneness with God, you could say. And into love, right? So that doesn't, obviously, it's not a permission slip to now go and, punch somebody in the face and say, this is Leela. We want to do our best to embody our spirituality as best as we can to make whatever impact we're called to make, out of compassion, out of love, right? But to expect the whole world to reach that sort of shift, I don't think it's reasonable, because I don't see how we would continue to expand and evolve without some context for growth. And context for growth, to me, it's ugly, it's messy, it's painful at times, and I think it's necessary. Some of the most difficult experiences in my life were the greatest blessings for me. And so how would I have developed and grown and evolved if people didn't hurt me, right? And so that's sort of my perspective on the matter. It would be nice. That would be, and growth involves some difficult experiences for sure.
Yeah, man. I feel that. So coming from that perspective, it seems to be like life is a test. Assuming we have free will, it seems like we're sent here with the essence of free will as a test. Like, okay, are you going to use this seemingly dark world, this bleak world that we put you in, to be able to reach the perspective, see through your darkness, and see the light through the darkness? But it's up to you. It's up to you, being that you forgot you were God. It's up to you to find that essence within yourself. So to me, it seems like this human incarnation is some kind of test, assuming we have free will. Like I said, I'm still up in the air if we have free will or not, but assuming we have free will, it seems like this is like a video game in a way, the greatest game that you could play. And as the player, as a human being, it's up to you here to take a hold of the controller to be able to orient yourself out of the shitty game, I guess you could say, out of a different way to approach the game, I guess you could say, a different way to play the game of life. Does that resonate with you? You know what I mean? Does it seem like this is some kind of test for human beings, and not everybody's gonna pass the test, where maybe that's where reincarnation comes in to the whole play? But yeah, just going off of that, would you say this whole life here is some sort of test for our souls, maybe you could say?
Right. I think the essence of what you're saying is valid. I would just use the word playground instead of test.
I like that.
Right. Mm-hmm. We're here when we're at school, we learn in the playground and we learn in the classroom taking tests and whatnot, but both are equally very important. And being on the playground has a little bit more of a welcoming feeling to it. And I think, yeah, for sure, we're here to play and to learn, how to navigate difficult situations and how to remember who we really are, and to bring that childlike innocence and childlike wonder and genius into our adult life, And I think that life sends us different challenges to provoke us to remember these things that we always really knew. I like to think of it as a bit of both free will and destiny. So many different ways we can talk about this, right? And I'm not fixed on one perspective, but one way I like to look at it is that there's a very powerful river, and that river is flowing, and it's going where it's going to go, and that river is destiny. And we're in that river, and we have a choice. We can try to swim upstream, but it's so powerful, we're not going to really get anywhere. We can kick, we can scream, say, I don't want to go, or we can relax and go. But in the end, we're going to go where we're going to go. How we respond when we're in the river determines our experience of the unfolding of our destiny. And at times we're going to kick and scream, and that's okay too. At times we're going to relax and go with it. But I think that there is something much greater than us, greater than myself, that has a trajectory that it's bringing us towards, and it's taking care of everything for us. It's giving us the challenges. It's giving us the energy, the inspirations, the books to read, the conversations to have, the insights to help us to get there, so that when we do get to that destiny, it all makes sense. It's not like we just snap our finger and we're there. Well, I'm totally at peace, enlightened, and free. No, there was a journey along the way to get us there, so that it makes sense, right? To provide context for how we got there. So that's what I think about when I think about free will and destiny. I don't really like to get fixated on one or the other. Some people need to know that there is free will and they need to get up and do something about their situation. Others need to maybe relax a little bit and trust and surrender into destiny. So we have both of these perspectives in our toolkit that we can pull out at certain times, depending on, the season of our life, depending on the situation, depending on where we're at in our journey.
I agree. Yeah. It's like float downstream, but when you're floating, you also have a paddle. You can kind of direct your way. You're in a tube, just float down. Don't try to paddle opposite the stream. Surrender to the stream. And yeah, you can still direct your way down, go left or right in the stream, but like you said, ultimately it's the same destination off of the waterfall, maybe you could say.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I agree. Surrender is huge in this. And it's like we use our free will to surrender to the stream. So there is free will. And I can do whatever I want. I can go drive my car 90 in a 20-mile-per-hour lane. I could go run around naked if I wanted to. I could do whatever I wanted to do right now. But using my free will, I'm not going to, because that's just going to cause me inertia. Like we said, we don't want to do that. With this great power comes great responsibility. And with that, responsibility is actually to surrender to the way, the Tao, to that greater force. And that I'm coming to find in my own journey is actually peace and happiness. Because we're all in the pursuit of happiness, especially in America, right? That's a saying from what, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, one of those guys. It's the pursuit of happiness, right? Well, they didn't tell us. They didn't put in the Constitution, the Declaration, the pursuit of happiness is actually just surrendering to God. It's not from materialism. It's actually just being able to just float with the flow. Whatever comes up, you go with that. It's like surrendering to a certain intuitive guidance, a certain internal barometer or internal compass that leads the way. And then once you can find that, that's peace, man. That's peace, because it's like knowing that everything's perfect. It doesn't imply inaction. It doesn't imply that I'm just gonna sit on the couch all day and eat Doritos. It's all perfect, man. It's all God. Don't you get it? Just gonna chill out. No, it's actually the opposite, I feel like. It actually implies more so of a orientation toward action or servitude or even creation, you could say. But it's surrendering to that flow of creation, and that is a sense of peace. I think all human beings are creators. We're like a tool of the divine. We're another facet of the divine. We were put here for a reason. It's not all just random. All human beings were put here. We have hands to do things. We have a mind to kind of formulate things. We were all put here for some kind of inherent divine purpose that probably goes beyond our comprehension. But if you tap into yourself, right, you can find out what your innate purpose is here and go with that. Like there is this intuitive guidance that one can serve and create along with. Like you said, I think you said at the beginning of the podcast, what did you say? You were invited, or you feel like you're serving this greater force. I forget the exact words that you used, but you explained it pretty well, man. Like you're it's kind of like Jesus take the wheel type thing. Like you're still here acting, but you're acting in accordance to some other worldly force that is kind of pulling the puppet strings to your life a little bit. And that seems daunting, right? To see somebody that doesn't know what I'm talking about. It's like, what? That seems scary, that there is this omnipotent force that is deciding how I should live my life. Like, we don't like to think about that. Like, as a human, we like to have, especially in America, we like to think we have a sense of sovereignty to our life. We do whatever we want. But going more and more into yourself, it's like, yeah, you recognize that we do actually have free will. You can do whatever you want, but that's not going to bring me peace and happiness. It's not going to bring me any kind of bliss, I guess you could say. So going with that motion, going with that flow, that greater creator that is all within us, it's within us, but also outside of us. It's both. If you go with that force, that essence, that I believe is how we reach a state of lack of inertia in this humanly form. And isn't that what we all want? Don't we all just want to be happy and find peace in a way that is best for our life and our circumstances? I just don't think we know how to go about it. But putting it very simply, it's you just gotta go with God. You just gotta go with the flow, man. It's a cliche for a reason. Literally, just go with the flow. And that doesn't mean, like I said, become a hippie. Not like that. Going with the flow is the total opposite of that. You almost aid the flow. You become the flow. And then from there, like I said, life starts to become magical, starts to make a little bit more sense. You find purpose and placement, peace, happiness, all the good things that we that we yearn for. It comes from that. It truly comes from going with God, man. Yeah. Yeah. That's all I got to
Yeah,
say.
definitely. It's not just about finding peace, like you said, sitting on the couch, going into meditation and checking out. It's about finding purpose in conjunction with being in the now, enjoying the process, finding
Yeah.
purpose, living out in the relative world. Within some traditions, in in yoga, for example, if you attain, I heard this like years ago. Somebody asked me where I heard it from. I couldn't tell you, but there's an idea of you attain self-realization as an ascetic, as whatever, as a yogi in a cave, but that's not it. You've got to return and be a householder, have a family, raise kids, participate in society from that state of self-realization, right? So you've got to embody it, live it out, go with the flow in that way, and not just keep it for yourself in the cave, but, contribute from that state of consciousness. And it feels incredible to do that. And that's my intention as well. I don't just feel I'm here to just, be this Mr. Spiritual guy. There's a lot more to my life than this work. And a lot of it has nothing to do with spirituality on the outside. Inside, all of it does, right? Because I'm in the flow, in the process.
Yeah.
So I feel that for sure. 100%.
Yeah. That's the path, man. I think that's it's gonna be a reality for a lot of people. Let's go within, find out what you're not, and then find out what you are. And create from that. Create from that almost dualistic mindset, even though it's truly non-dual. But it seems like when you can think about it rationally, and when I can put it rationally, there is the essence of us that is infallible, unthinkable, truly can't put words on it, but I'm trying to put words on it right now, which is ironic. It's Purusha. It's the Brahman. It's the greater essence of us that we truly can't put our finger on. But there lies that ultimate presence of peace, happiness, love, kumbaya. Take that essence and then bring it into the play of life and rewrite the script of your life here and create a better play for not only yourself first, but then others. Because it's really the same thing. That's what you can come to find. That's the essence of the path, man. Truly. Not everybody's meant to be a monk. There's definitely people that are meant to be monks, for sure. But use the monk's life as a lesson. That's what I believe monks are for. And the people and the ascended masters from the past and now are for. It's like use them as a lesson for you to be a householder. The vast majority of us, I think, are supposed to be householders here. Live in this so-called the world. And I think it's possible to do that. Live as a practical monk. Like keep that mindset of the monk, of the master, but yet still be a real person. And I think that's the best way to serve humanity at this point. To anybody that's listening to this, because I don't think there's a lot of monks listening to this right now. Most people are probably householders. Most people are probably regular people, quote unquote. So the best way to go about, I think, becoming the best version of yourself so you can find your own sense of peace is to take that mindset of the monk, which is really a great simplification of your life. Take that great simplification, the spiritual simplification, translate that, transmutate that energy from that Purusha energy into the world of Maya. And that's the gist. I see it as that. It's pretty simple. Like I said, it's a pretty simple equation when you put it that way. But the problem, I mean, it's not really a problem, but the difficulty is being able to stay on that essence. I think for many that are on this path, how do we resonate at that through all the trouble that comes up in our life? How do we keep that saint-like attitude at all times, even when somebody is, somebody's yelling at you for something you said, or you're in a fight with your significant other, or somebody cut you off in traffic? What would Ramana Maharshi do if he got cut off in traffic? That's what I like to say. It's like, what would Jesus do, right? What would any of these saints do in any situation as you're living your humanly life? That's how I try to approach all of these lessons in the scriptures of the past. What would these people do for me in my situation? Because it's not going to serve you or anybody else if you try to be too holy, or you try to be too much like a monk and be like inauthentic to your karma. It's not, you're actually going to dig your hole deeper, I believe, if you try to do that. I've been there for sure. Like when I first got on this whole thing, I was trying to be way too holy, way too the spiritual guy, trying to convince others that this is the way, man. You got to read this book, like watch this video. And it does the complete opposite. So you just have to, same thing, go with the flow. Don't try to force anything, and it'll all unfold how it's supposed to in your own circumstances and in your own life. Yeah, don't summon that up, what I just said. Don't try to be too holy. Bring that, but keep that essence of that holiness in your life. And I think that's the dance. If you can dance between those two poles that really aren't two poles, but putting it how I'm putting it right now, dance between the saint and the sinner, the saint and the hedonist. And if you could find that middle path, that middle way in this world, then I think that is touching upon the flow that we're talking about.
Yeah, I feel that for
Yeah,
sure.
man. Yeah, man. Hope that
I've
makes
lived
sense.
the same challenges as you, wanting to
Yeah.
tell everybody that, this is what they've got to do. They've got to read these books. They've got to meditate. They've got to listen to these talks. I've been there too. And that came from a place where I wanted to change people, right? I was trying to teach people about total unconditional acceptance. Read this book and it will show you how to be totally unconditionally accepting of the present moment. But me sharing the book with them was, total rejection of who they were in the moment, right?
It means well.
Yeah, it does.
Because you know why?
But
It's rejection of yourself in the moment. Because only everybody else is just a reflection of yourself. So when you're forcing that upon somebody else in that manner, then truly that's a reflection to you that you're being inauthentic to yourself in your own path at that point, because everybody's just a mirror and reflection. So it's just another message. When somebody's like, bro, get this out of here, I'm not interested whatsoever. That's a message for you that you're not as developed or as holy as you think you are. So yeah, don't try to preach. Nobody likes preaching. Nobody likes the preacher on the street corner. So I came to find that out not recently, very quickly, that that's not the way to go whatsoever. As much as we want to help people, as much as we think that it would help people, the only thing that we can do, the best thing that we can do, how we save the world, is we save ourselves. And that's really the most powerful thing that we can all do here. Save yourself first, and then if others truly are, what's the word I'm looking for? Curious enough in your own journey, they'll approach you. And then when somebody is open, when their door is open, that's when you can, show them the book or the podcast or the video or whatever it is. But you can't force this down people's throats. Nobody likes that. I wouldn't like that for sure. Yeah. Go with the flow. Go with the flow. Yeah, that's the last. I feel like the last attachment of the spiritual path is not trying to be so attached to being spiritual. Not trying to think that you're better than anybody because you're spiritual. It's really just like letting go of that idea as well of spirituality, and just still being able to recognize your humanness. And then once you can kind of let that go and know that it's a process for you and everybody else, then I think that's the essence. That's the essence, man. And then others will just naturally flock to you if that's the vibration.
Right.
But yeah, no one likes the preacher. Yeah, man.
In the beginning of our talk, I mentioned a little bit about the diagram that I had with Sahaja Samadhi. One of the things that occurs in Sahaja Samadhi is the distinction between spiritual and non-spiritual. Like that really just falls away.
Yeah.
The idea that there could possibly be anything that's not spiritual, it just like does not compute.
Yeah.
The idea that there could be anybody who isn't on a path, it can't be unseen.
Yeah.
All of that falls away. Like the most, quote unquote, lost people, the most atrocious anything, it's no less spiritual or holy than a temple or some statue or some guy meditating. Yeah. The distinction completely falls away. And there's a total liberation because the distinction falls away within yourself as well. The pressure to be spiritual, the pressure to walk the razor's edge of the path. You recognize the razor's edge was the journey, but it was never really the case. You couldn't escape it no matter how much you tried. Just like we were saying in the beginning, children are born awake. It doesn't leave us. We're just playing make-believe for a little bit until we remember. That's what I feel it is. So it's an exciting journey for sure.
Exciting to say the least. Interesting to say the least. But I'm glad I'm on it. Definitely grateful to be alive in this whole thing. All the ups and downs, twists and turns, the drama, the darkness. I'm glad. I'm happy to be here. This whole thing. I think a lot of people are just looking for hope. I know I was. Just looking for a sense of purpose for living. But yeah, once you get on the path, man, once you can recognize, you have your own awareness of the path, there lies a sense of purpose. Even though, like you said, everything is spiritual, I think you have to be, it's like, yeah, even if you don't know everything is spiritual, yes, it is spiritual, but there is something very spiritual coming to that awareness that everything is spiritual. If that makes sense. Like with that awareness that everything is spiritual, that's grace. That's truly a blessing. That everything is God. Everything in this one non-dual sense is just God playing out. Even the darkness, death, sickness, injury, it's really behind the scenes. God is just laughing at this giant cosmic joke that he's created, that us humans take so seriously. But really, when it comes down to it, man, yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So how can we stay on that wavelength at all times, that it's all good? I think that's the goal, even though there's no goal, because it's always spiritual and it's all God at all times. But for me, it seems like that's the path. It's to know that literally it's all perfect. It's all imperfectly perfect right here, right now. And it's really all just God's giant joke, it seems, for us. For what reason, where it's going, who knows? Just be here now. Don't think about it too much. It's interesting to say the least. Just enjoy the show while it's here, because ultimately it's not going to be here forever, at least in this point of view, from where you're at in your body. Maybe you'll go on in a different state of consciousness and a different point of view, different perspective. But in this humanly form that we're all currently in, as you listen and as I speak, it's very temporary and it's very short. So like we mentioned before, the Buddhists say this human form is not to be taken for granted. I agree. Use this time wisely, and this time will be actually quite enjoyable if you know how to orient yourself. Yeah, man. I don't have anything else to say, anything else to ask you. I think we could probably start to wrap this thing up. Do you have any last words? Anything you want to say?
Well, I agree with what you're saying, man.
Yeah, we can keep going if you want. If you want to like go off that topic, that point that I just said. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else to say, man. I think this is a good convo, though.
Yeah, I think that it's important to remember, like you said, it's all good. And of course, in the higher picture, it's all good for sure. In the midst of difficult emotional experiences, sickness, heartbreak, grief, I think it's important not to use our spirituality against ourselves and to, quote unquote, gaslight ourselves and say that it's all good when, there's intense grief within our heart, for example. It's important to also be welcoming of things that don't feel good and letting those things be here as well. That was a major, major shift on my path, because early on, there was a sense of, wow, everything is perfect. Everything is wonderful. It's all good. And there would be waves where I would ride this feeling of it's all good and that things would feel good in life. But then when I fell off because of something that would have happened in my life, the crash it's unbearable.
Yeah.
Because now we're thinking, well, I thought everything was all good and it was going that way. And now I feel so horrible. And now we're compounding our spirituality on top of grief, trying to make it go away. And, we gaslight ourselves in the way that we say, oh, I'm not living the teachings. Why am I experiencing this attachment? Somebody's died in my family, or somebody is, broken up with me, and I'm feeling grief. Oh, this is attachment. This is attachment to their form. I shouldn't. Even though they died, it's all good. No, like we got to be a little gentle with ourselves. Feel those things. Feel grief. Feel heartbreak, sickness. If we can be gentle with ourselves, then we can, like I was saying, recognize the distinction. Recognize that there is no distinction between what's not spiritual. It's all spiritual. Everything, grief, even being caught up in the ego, that's welcome here too. And then paradoxically, we also don't want to use that as a reason to spiritually bypass and, hurt ourselves or other people and say, oh, it's all spiritual, right? So it's a very fine line, because we tend to get caught up in anything that makes it easy for us. Any form of avoidance, escapism, we will latch onto it very quickly, right? And I've done this myself. I'm speaking from direct experience. Somebody tells you it's all Leela. Oh, it's all Leela. Perfect. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to worry about spirituality. I don't have to worry about bettering myself. I don't have to worry about taking care of my body. Whatever happens is God's will. Well, no. And then on the other hand, we want to, live as a human being, take care of our bodies, take care of each other, take care of our responsibilities, work to bring all of the parts of our system that are not in alignment with the highest truth that we've realized. We realize very high truths on the level of the mind, but the body, the chakra system, the nervous system doesn't always, instantly snap into alignment with those things. The body's telling it it's living on a different timeline. It's lagging behind in development a little bit. And so we have to address the body. We have to address the parts of us that are knee-jerk reactions, which take us out of those mindsets or those spiritual ideas. Somebody breaks into my house, being in the now, all of that, it's out the window, right?
It's all good.
Right. Oh, it's all good, man. Come on in.
Yeah.
So there's a fine balance, a fine dance. And I just want to leave people with that message here that, you're a human being, right? And so human beings are welcome to experience the full range of all emotions, thoughts, and they're all welcome here. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't have to use our spirituality against ourselves. We use it as a tool to develop and find more peace, decrease suffering. But when peace is lacking, when suffering is present, that's okay too. It doesn't mean that we're bad people, or that we're not, good little spiritual boys and girls. It's not anything like that. right? It's all welcome here. And that's been my work lately, is having spent the past decade or so trying to abide as a holy person, spiritual in the moment, that like, just find your inner peace, let it go. It's all good. I'm trying to now relax those impositions that I put on myself and say, it's okay if I feel a little sad. It's okay if I feel a little upset. It's okay. It's welcome here too. And this has been a new level of peace that I've tapped into, is the full acceptance of not being quote unquote spiritual. That's okay too.
Yeah.
And I would invite those who may be using their spirituality to make things harder for themselves to consider a perspective like this as well. Because like we were saying in the beginning, there are many people who live this life, go through hardship, no spirituality. They don't suffer, in my opinion, they don't suffer as much as those who live through hardship with spirituality. Because now there's like a whole element of like, why am I feeling this way? Oh, I'm identified with the ego. Oh, I'm experiencing emotions that are of a lower vibration. This is bad. People who don't have any spirituality aren't saying any of that. They're just experiencing it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's something to consider. It's something that I definitely have lived, very intensely at times as well, beating myself up for not being spiritual, or, not living up to whatever ideas of spirituality I thought I had to. Right.
Yeah. Yep. Well said. It's just it could be another trap. It could be another attachment. The key is to not even be attached to being unattached.
Well said. Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think those are good words to end this thing on. I appreciate your time. Appreciate your energy, your wisdom. Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. Hope anybody else did. Yeah, keep doing your thing, man. You definitely know what's up. I look forward to seeing whatever else you put on your channel. And yeah, I mean, what's in the future for you? If we can get into that, real quick. Do you have anything special planned?
Well, thank you so much, for having me on the show and the compliments, man. It really means a lot. For me in the future, it's kind of hard to say because, like I was saying, I mean, I don't want to keep harping on this point, but really, I'm just an employee. This work, I don't have a long-term plan, a long-term vision. Generally speaking, I can see myself doing a lot of more work around the topic of Kundalini awakening. In particular, I see myself as somebody who's meant to help those who have been using their spirituality against themselves in the way that I just spoke about, kind of invite them to drop those ideas as well. So that's the kind of direction that my work has been going in lately, from what I can tell. I have some plans to get some more people with advanced stages of consciousness to chat and explain a little bit about their journey, a little bit about the Kundalini process, which is very, very significant to me in my work. And, I want to get some people on from all walks of life that have, had some pretty far out, trippy, challenging experiences. So that's kind of the direction I see my work going with my own podcast, with my own YouTube channel as well. And so, thanks a lot for asking that. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Well, you got a bright future. Looking forward to it, man. We're just getting started here. Both of us, anybody that's listening, we're all just getting started here in this whole new world that we're creating. So let's keep on keeping on, spreading the good word, and great things will come about. But yeah, other than that, appreciate your time and energy. Like I said, wish you all the best and peace out.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you too, and all the best with your channel. I love the work that you're doing, and keep at it, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate you, Gary. Take care now.
Take care, man.